of Islay, and for those of you who don't know, it's a remote west coast island that if you want to get to, it's going to take a 2.5-hour ferry drive, but to get to the point where the ferry leaves, you have to drive 2 hours west of Glasgow. So it's a long way from anywhere. If you want to take the flight, then you have to have good nerves. It does only take a 20-minute trip from Glasgow, but let me tell you, last month there was 2 occasions where it actually landed sideways, the plane. So it's really up to you. You know? I'm not joking. I am being serious.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, they do the same thing.
Yeah. No, Las Vegas. Glasgow.
Oh, Glasgow, yeah. So that's where I live and I spend my time, and my day job's at the distillery, but my confession to you is I'm not actually born and bred in Islay, which is a shock. I actually come from the northeast of Scotland, from another very, very fine whisky region called Speyside. So I grew up really in the heart of the whisky making country, and whisky was always around me. It was part of our culture, so it was just part of who you were. We didn't think it was strange or you know, forbidden or anything like that. And actually the first distillery that I ever visited was when I was 8 years old and I was on a school trip. And that's how much it was part of the culture, right? And you know, go for it. So, I remember that trip to this day, but I don't remember seeing barrels or stills or anything like that. But I was sat in front of a video with my class watching a film of a man telling the story behind the whisky that he was presenting, a bit of the history and a bit of why it was so special. And like every man in Scotland walking the streets, he was wearing a kilt, a tartan bonnet and a tartan waistcoat. And at the end of his presentation, he wanted to prove to his audience just how credible he was as a Scotsman to be telling the story. Now, this is definitely one for the ladies. You all know how a true Scotsman proves his worth, yeah? So remember, I'm 8 years old. You forgot that, but... And he goes to lift up his kilt, and underneath, appropriately hidden, was a bottle of whiskey. And I swear to goodness, that is a true story. And I was, a couple of years ago, I was doing a bit of a whiskey tour with the ambassador for that distillery, and I told that story, and he said, "Do you know what, Vicky, they still have that video." I'm like, "No way." I'm going to tell you how many years ago that was.
Is that guy still employed?
So it was, yeah, that was my first kind of impact of whiskey. And yeah. So then I went on, as a teenager, I worked for a visitor centre in Speyside. It wasn't a whisky visitor centre, they actually made soup and jam. But anyway, but in the visitor centre, like every visitor centre in Speyside, they always had a good display of whiskey. And people would come from all over the world and ask me the questions, and I was so proud to be able to tell them all about the distillery. At this point, I didn't obviously taste the whiskey, but I used to tell them which one was best. Well, I would decide on the shape of the bottle, so whichever one looked the best to me was obviously the best. But I always had connections in the industry, so I was very fortunate enough to learn from a lot of distillery managers and a lot of people about the process, and also about how to take whiskey not as a drink but as a taste experience. And a few years ago, 2007, 2008, just at the end of the year, I got the opportunity to move to Islay and start working for Laphroaig distillery. The #1 peated malt whisky on the planet is like a dream come true. You know, this is the best job in the world. So there's three strands to my job, and I was originally taken on to develop the visit experience at the distillery, and this was because the demand for visits was increasing all the time, and the team there didn't have the time to manage it, because basically it was a distillery manager that was taking people around. So when I started, I had a part-time tour guide. That was it. I now have a team of 10, and the visitor numbers are still growing, double digits every year, and we're very proud to have developed an award-winning distillery visitor experience. So that's part of my job. Another part of my job is I come and do some global ambassador visits like this one, which is always pretty cool. I just wish I had more time to spend here, because we flew in this morning and we're flying out tomorrow, and I haven't even seen one cowboy yet, so I'm really disappointed.
We'll have to fix that. She's been looking too. She's been looking.
I've been looking. And then the third part of my job, and it's probably the bit I enjoy the most, is I really get involved in the production, the day-to-day operations of the distillery, working with a team. We've got a team of 33 at the site that make Laphroaig 3.3 million litres of alcohol every year, and I'm responsible for making sure that the spirit quality is good, and I'm also responsible for checking the whisky quality is good, so I can taste out the casks before anybody else and get involved in picking them and writing tasting notes and stuff like that. So I drink whisky for a living.